Well, I think the power in nonviolent civil disobedience is breaking through to people and exposing the reality of a situation through our own vulnerability, giving people a new perspective on what's going on. Like with segregation, most people at the time didn't really think it was a big deal. It was like, oh, separate water fountains, what's the big deal? You know, it's separate but equal, and it seemed like it was maybe not quite fair, but it wasn't like it was an attack against people. It wasn't like it was a war against people. But then when groups like the Freedom Riders started riding through and making themselves very vulnerable and basically getting the shit kicked out of them, and people started seeing those pictures of people getting beaten up, of people getting dragged out of lunch counters and things like that, then it suddenly clicked. Because they saw that vulnerability, it reframed what segregation was in people's minds. It was all of a sudden that segregation is a war against people. It's a war against human beings. And I think the same thing is what we need to do with climate change. Climate change is very clearly a war against people. And especially a war against the young. You know, it's people's lives being traded for the profit of others. That's a war. And yet it doesn't look that way. It doesn't feel that way to most people. It just looks like businessmen making profit. It looks like congressmen not doing their job very well. So when we make ourselves vulnerable and invite that reaction against ourselves, whether it's a physical reaction or a reaction of the legal system or whatever, it starts to reframe that perspective for people. The climate movement has been really creative at trying a lot of different methods for how we can create this radical shift that we need without anybody really making any sacrifices or taking big personal risks. And none of those have really worked, and I think it's probably time that we try the path of actually putting ourselves on the line, and I think it could take far fewer people than we really think to do that. And history like the Freedom Riders shows that with a really small group of people, they made major change really quickly. And when we see those numbers about like how many people really understand the climate crisis, or how many people even believe that it's true, and it's like, you know, less than half actually believe that it's true, and only something like 11 to 13% really understand the climate crisis, I think people are too quick to be discouraged by those numbers. You know, if 11% of Americans, that's 33 million people. If there's 33 million people that really understand that the status quo is condemning our children to an unlivable future, that's plenty. That's plenty of people to create the kind of change that we need. We have all the people we need on our side right now to really bring the fossil fuel industry to its knees and put government back in the hands of the people.